What's happening, guys and girls? Acrinator here, and I'd just like to start off by saying a huge thank you to everyone that watches this series. I was worried that the change in upload schedule from once every other week to this newer season format would get some negative feedback, but I haven't received any as of yet. So again, thank you for your patience. I promise it'll have all been worth the wait. Anyways, welcome one and all to another episode of World of Warcraft Dungeon Overview. Today we'll be starting up the last leg of the Cataclysm instances by parading through the northern Stranglethorn Vale. We'll be blasting through Zul'Gurub with my druid you see here, so with that being said, let's dive straight into it. As you may recall back when we did the episode on Zul'Aman, the Troll Empire used to span across the vast majority of the world back when the only continent was the original Kalimdor. Led by the Zandalari tribe, smaller subsets of trolls branched out and began to claim lands of their own. In the southeastern wilds that would later become the southern peninsula of the eastern kingdoms known as Stranglethorn Vale, the Gurubashi tribe set up camp. Over thousands of years, their empire expanded into a bustling jungle city known as Zul'Gurub. Unlike their northern cousins, the Gurubashi lived out their existence with relatively little resistance from other local inhabitants. They were the kings and queens of their domain, and they would be the only ones to decide if and when their rule would come to an end. Unfortunately for the Jungle Empire, the Gurubashi tribe was split between varying ideals on how best to wield their dominance over the region. Most of their people wanted to continue on worshipping their esteemed Loa and sticking to their age-old traditions, while a select group of priests known as the Atal-I wished for so much more. After the Sundering ripped Kalimdor to shreds and stranded the Gurubashi from their benefactors, the Zandalari, life became significantly harder. Their hunting grounds were but a fraction of what they used to be, and the trolls had to either learn to make do with what they were given, or perish. As I stated before, most wished to simply move on with their lives peacefully. However, the Atal-I began to fear the demise of their beloved tribe if drastic measures were not taken. These extremists went to such lengths as to contact the Loa Hakar the Soulflare and offer the servitude of the entire Gurubashi tribe in exchange for their survival and retained dominion over the land. Hakar did aid the trolls initially, though the savage deity soon began asking for more of his subjects. It eventually escalated to a point where the Soulflare demanded to be summoned into Azeroth to rain down chaos on all those who would oppose his malevolent rule. Horrified with how far down the rabbit hole they had dove, most of the Gurubashi revolted against the Dark Loa, with only the Atal-I remaining in defense of Hakar. What ensued was a civil war among Zul'Gurub's denizens, which resulted in the priests of Hakar being expelled to the Swamp of Sorrows, and all further practice of worshipping the blood god became punishable by death. If this sounds vaguely familiar, it's because we've briefly covered this storyline already back when we did the Temple of Atal Hakar during the classic set of instances. You can go back and check out that video if you want to know how the Gurubashi exiles fared against their circumstances, but for now let's get back to the dungeon at hand. Despite the Gurubashi's best efforts, rogue elements from the Hakari occasionally manage to slip inside their culture yet again and cause chaos, before ultimately being expunged in a brutally violent fashion. One such example of this happening would be back during the time of Vanilla, when a band of brave adventurers traversed into the jungle stronghold in order to secure the area in the name of Booty Bay's safety. Ever since that fateful day years ago, the Gurubashi were left beaten and fractured, a shadow of their former selves, unable to even regain command of the lesser tribes formerly held under their banner. So, as you can imagine, when the Zandalari prophet Zul gathered the tribes together to restore their lost influence and enact revenge on the Alliance and Horde, the Gurubashi jumped at the opportunity. With the blessing of Zul, the Gurubashi had given up their benign and honorable practices in favor of subduing and utilizing the power of Hakar for their dark rituals. Gone are the days of fighting with the power of the wild gods, now using the blood god's power to corrupt and empower the jungle trolls' forces. It's almost impossible to predict exactly what horrors await Azeroth's adventurers inside those ancient stone walls, but one thing is certain: this is going to be a lot harder than the first time we declared war on the Gurubashi. Zul'Gurub is a level 85 heroic dungeon located in the eastern portion of northern Stranglethorn Vale. It's pretty much the only thing over on that end of the map, and it's surrounded by giant stone walls, so I really can't fathom how you'd miss it, especially considering it's one of the primary focuses for the questing in that area. Just head up to the entrance of the great city and the dungeon portal should be easy enough for you to locate. There shouldn't be any high-level NPCs guarding the way, so just walk right in like you normally would. Originally a benevolent priest to the Serpent Loa in the area, Vinoxus was eventually enslaved by Hakar during Vanilla and was eventually killed by adventurers. He has been since ripped from the spirit realm and brought back in order to defend his home against us yet again. Except this time he has the backing of the Zandalari as well as Hakar's dark magic, empowering him even further. I hope you have your nature resistance up high because this one is going to be a real doozy. This fight has 3 phases that will periodically cycle with drastically shifting abilities depending on what phase you're currently in, so pay close close attention. For the first phase, there'll be a cluster of poison clouds that will spawn in and damage anyone caught in them. You'll have to be quick on your feet to get out of this little maze and over to the boss without face tanking a ton of nature DOTs. Venoxus will also cast an interruptible poison beam onto a random player for ridiculous amounts of damage. Thankfully, this is the only thing you have to worry about interrupting for this phase, so just use your interrupts for Whispers of Hethys and you'll be fine in that regard. The last thing you'll have to worry about for phase 1 is something called Toxic Link, where a poison chain will link 2 players together. This will damage both players until either 10 seconds passes or they move a certain distance away from each other. The trick is that a toxic explosion bursts out of those afflicted after the chain breaks, meaning that you'll both want to run away from the rest of your group before snapping it. The healer is also going to want to focus on keeping these 2 alive for the time being, since the chain does a fair amount of damage to the linked players until it breaks. For the second phase, Venoxus transforms into a giant snake and begins attacking players with more poison-based abilities. For one, the poison clouds will still be spawned in, so watch out for those, especially if you're melee DPS. What's worse is that you not only have to worry about the clouds at this point, but also a poison pool the boss will spawn in at a random player's location. This pool does also increase in size over time, so be careful about where you stand here. And the final bit for this phase is that the boss will cast a poison breath ability, damaging all players standing in front of him. So just have the tank face him away from the rest of the group and you'll be fine. At the start of the third phase, Venoxus will return to the altar that he started on and draw the poison pools towards him, though the boss will also take double the damage during this phase of the fight. This is the time when you'll want to pop all of your cooldowns and burst him down as fast as possible before he returns to phase 1 all over again. Other than that, just make sure you have a lot of AoE heals prepared because you'll be needing them for this fight. Mandokir was an ancient warrior of the Gurubashi that has long since passed away. The Bloodscalp tribe, once a member of the Gurubashi Empire, took to desecrating the Bloodlord's tomb a few years ago, leading to a lot of tension between the 2 tribes. When Zul offered his services to Zul'Gurub, one of the first things the Gurubashi asked for was revenge against those that had befouled their hero's resting place. The result of this request is that Mandokir now walks the jungles yet again, using the Bloodscalp's chieftain's corpse as a husk for his wandering spirit. This fight is gonna be a bitch, and there's absolutely no way around it, so buckle up. Mandokir has a few abilities that will kill you, practically regardless of what you do. What's worse is that he gains a charge of a buff called Level Up whenever he kills someone, which increases his damage by 20% each time. The nice part about this is that chained spirits surrounding the boss's arena will revive players that are killed, and give them a minor buff to their damage and healing. This effect also stacks, but trust me when I say that it's not a viable strategy to constantly die to stack this buff. Mandokir gains more from you dying than you do from being rezzed. The important part for this fight is the raptor accompanying the boss, called Ogon, from which Mandokir will periodically step down from his mount and order it to attack the chained spirits. If the raptor is allowed to reach the spirit, it will kill them and move on to the next one. You need to focus down Ogon whenever it enters the fight, unless you want to wipe faster than you can say, oh shit. One annoying factor is that Ogon will be resurrected after being killed, but it does give you a moment's reprieve from worrying about your res. Just burst down the boss as quickly as possible, heal the ever-loving shit out of your teammates, and prioritize the raptor whenever it's out, and you just might have a chance. In a small corner of Zul'Gurub lies what was once the Gurubashi's treasury for historical artifacts detailing the history of the tribe's greatest tales. Everything from legendary warriors, wise shamans, and the unfortunate anti-heroes were inscribed within the texts of this place. Unfortunately, it's now a little worse for wear ever since our first raid on the city during vanilla. Now, with the dark energies of the captive soul flare emanating throughout the jungle, these old tales have begun coming to life, endangering any who would be foolish enough to wake the resting dead. The next boss is a tad unique, since it has a chance to summon one of 4 random bosses. Depending on your luck, you could be facing warriors, seers, or even a berserker. Thankfully, the mechanics are relatively simple and boil down to the basic concepts that all fights tend to gravitate towards. Just avoid the fire, focus down adds, keep your distance from the boss if you can, and prioritize healing allies that are stunned or affected by any DOTs. The specifics, however, are less interesting than just bursting down the boss and being on your merry way. Granted, after the Mandokir fight, I think you deserve a palate cleanser, so to speak. One of the fiercest hunters that can be found throughout the jungles of Stranglethorn is undoubtedly the Panther, for which they are led by the great Loa Bethek. After her sister and former high priestess Arlok was slain by adventurers long ago, the Loa appointed Kilnara as the new vessel for the Panther's power. As a result, we've had to watch our every step through this land, lest we fail to notice the Night Stalkers lurking just out of sight. Kilnara has 2 phases to her fight, the first of which is relatively unimportant, just tank and spank her down for the time being, eventually forcing her into the second phase once she reaches half health. The real challenge happens during the start of the second phase, when the boss will awaken any of the 16 panthers still alive, bringing them all into the fight. And these panther trash mobs are the real mechanic to worry about for this encounter. Like I said, there are 16 of these panthers that will be sleeping around the area. They can be awoken by any attack or by the priestess when entering phase 2. What I would recommend doing is taking down 2 at a time until there are only 2 left, in which case you can just focus down the boss and AoE the remaining few adds down. You definitely don't want to deal with all 16 panthers at once because they have a nasty DOT that will stack and kill everyone if the lot of them join in at the same time. They're manageable in small numbers, but you're not going to survive if you think you can tank all of them. Zanzil is a witch doctor formerly of the Skull Splitter tribe who gained infamy by experimenting with concoctions that would turn his fellow trolls into mindless slaves. This was all well and good until he turned his potions on his own people when he ran out of test subjects, for which he was promptly exiled, before being offered a place to experiment with his dark arts in Zul'Gurub. You know you really fucked up when a tribe as ruthless as the Skull Splitter says you've gone too far, but I guess Zanzil didn't really need to learn his lesson thanks to the Gurubashi taking an interest in his abilities. This fight is going to have a lot of particle effects going on, but don't let that overwhelm you because it's actually pretty simple when taken down to its base elements. There's going to be a lot of shit spattered all over the ground, just stay out of the fire regardless of the color, and you'll avoid the damage it causes. The part that catches some people up is when Zanzil performs his secret techniques, which will be one of 3 abilities. He either uses his blue elixir, red elixir, or produces graveyard gas that takes on a green color. You'll notice that there will be 3 cauldrons placed around the boss arena, coinciding with the colors of the abilities I just mentioned. You're probably already catching on to where this is going, and yes, this fight is indeed color-coded. Nothing special here, just use the cauldron whose color is the same as the attack being used at that time. I could go into the specifics of what each one does, but to be honest, it doesn't matter so long as you use the correct cauldron. They're designed to negate the effects of each attack and save your asses in the long run. Jindo was the leader of the Gurubashi around the time of the raid in Vanilla. As you can imagine, failing to carry out the Soul Flayer's will and dying to nameless adventurers like that did not leave Hakkar very amused. Jindo's soul was tortured for what felt like millennia until he finally found his way back to the world of the living, with the help of Zul, and managed to capture the Blood God for his own nefarious purposes. The resurrected Jindo, now dubbed the Godbreaker, leads his people once again, this time waging war against not only Booty Bay, but the entire world. As much as we hate to give Hakkar his freedom back, it's currently a better option than the alternative. We don't have a choice in the matter, and for now we can only hope that the Blood God's hate of Jindo will trump his desire to destroy Azeroth. Before the actual fight itself, you want to clear out all the trash mobs on the walkway surrounding the temple. Specifically, you want to make sure to kill each of the berserkers on the 4 corners of the temple. They'll become important later on. The first phase of the fight is relatively easy, with only one main ability to watch out for. Jindo will place a dead zone on the ground, reducing magic damage taken for all targets within it, but also increasing casting time. Just kite the boss so that meleeers can stand inside the circle with the boss standing just outside of it. Casters will obviously want to stand outside of it as well, but at the very least the meleeers will take less magical damage. For phase 2, the boss will drag everyone into the spirit realm, where you'll notice Hakkar being chained to the temple. Players will want to spread out to avoid damage from a Shadow Spike ability Jindo will cast at a random player. These do a good amount of AoE damage to them, so again, avoid being close to the impact zone. Twisted Spirit trash mobs will also spawn in constantly to attack players, though these have very low health and can simply be AoE down and otherwise ignored. Just don't let them get out of control. The way to truly win this fight is to destroy all of the chains holding Hakkar down, which can only be destroyed by taking care of the barrier protecting them first. This is where the berserkers you killed before come in. The spirits of these creatures will be wherever you killed them, so you can kite them over to these chains, force them to use their smash ability on the barrier, and then proceed to break the chain afterwards. You can technically just keep one berserker for the entire fight, though they do periodically gain stacks of attacking speed buffs, so I'd recommend having at least 2 ready. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode, and if you did, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more like it, maybe even subscribe. Links to my social media and whatnot are in the description below. And as for the comment question, who do you think was leading the Gurubashi before Jindo broke free from the spirit realm? You'd imagine they wouldn't want to give up their authority, especially to someone who's previously failed to fend off attackers to Zul'Gurub. But we don't really hear about anyone. My best guess would be Kilnara, because she's the only priest or priestess in the dungeon that wasn't an old boss resurrected again, but that's only speculation at this point. I tend to doubt out the Gurubashi just went completely leaderless for so long, but what do you think? Anyways, that's all the time I've got for today. I hope this restores a little bit of good faith that I won't just neglect this series, and I am actually working on getting the seasons out in a timely manner. I hope that you all have a Merry Christmas for those of you that celebrate it, and for those of you that don't, I hope this was a nice little surprise on a random Tuesday for you. I'll see you all tomorrow for the continuation of the last few dungeons in Cataclysm, so until then, don't die.